Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in. I recommend you to subscribe to this channel because what I'm doing is every single week I take one topic that might be a bit, abstract or complicated, and I break it down so that anyone, you don't need to have like a science background at all to understand, what I'm going to explain to you, so that you understand the complicated concepts and you relate that directly to your health, your day to day, and then you can make the right choices for you in order to improve your day to day. So this week we are going to cover as well how the metabolism, age, and why you can't eat the same thing at 20 years old than at 40 years old. So this is a topic that as well, come across and is sometimes can come across quite complicated. Why your metabolism age? What does that mean? And then what are the things that you can do, really practically, in order to, slow down that process. And the thing is, a lot of people asking me, why can't you eat the same dish that you had, when you were 20? You could have like a massive bowl of pasta and a lot of, different food that are not really great, and then your body will, just get on with it, and you won't have any impact at all. But if you do that at 40 years old or 50 years old, then you will see like a massive impact. And then, I'm interested to drill down into exactly, why that's the case. It's not about, it's about biology basically. And the idea is I want to demystify this, this process. And there are two different pillars I need to be aware of. I'm going to take one by one. The first one is muscle loss, right? So many people know this, but it's important to remind ourselves that from the age of 30 years old, you lose between 3 and 8% of your muscle mass per decade. That's huge, right? That means that if you don't do anything, that is, naturally the body will, lose a lot of muscles. And that is really important because what that does is it slows the metabolism down, right? You hear that sometimes, as well, but I want to explain what does that mean, a slow metabolism, when your metabolism actually slow down. So what that means is that your body, burns calories at rest. So if you don't do anything at all, even if you sit on the sofa, your body will burn some calories. If you stand up, it will burn more calories. But everyone has got a base amount of calories that they burn, right? If you have a lot of muscles, basically, the body needs to burn a lot of calories to keep you just alive. So just by, having a lot of muscle, basically you can eat more, right? What happens is that if you lose a lot of that metabolism, that means that your body will burn a lot less calories at rest, which means that actually if you eat the same thing, then, you'll put on more weight, right? And the muscles actually consume a lot of energy even if you don't do anything. Again, when you sit down or if you just stand up, you will actually burn a lot of energy from the muscle. So if you have less muscle, obviously your engine is running in slow motion, right? The result is that the same plate that you had at 20 becomes a caloric excess at 40 years old. So this is the first pillar. This is muscle loss. It happens to every one of us, right? From the age of 30, and then it accelerates a lot after 60 years old. So something to bear in mind, the lost muscle. So second pillar is a bit more subtle. It's called the mitochondrial decline, right? And a link to that in insulin sensitivity. So let me just explain, because those are complicated words. The first one is mitochondria. So the mitochondria actually is it's a tiny energy factory that you have inside each of your cells. Your body is made of cells, of a lot of cells, and every single cell has got a little energy factory inside it that we call mitochondria as well. So those are very important because they are actually what's actually ensure that you have a lot of energy. With age, basically the efficiency of those little factories drops a lot, right? And then what happens is that they produce less energy from the same fuel that they have, so from the same food. So the consequence of that is that the insulin sensitivity decreases. So what does that mean, insulin sensitivity? The insulin sensitivity is the amount of insulin that your body need to produce to consume some food. We've seen that in other videos as well. Something really important to know is the insulin. So what the body does, every time that you eat, your liver produces insulin in order to process the food that you have and just store energy and fat, right? This is how the body works. Insulin is so important to understand how the body works, right? So insulin sensitivity decreasing, that means that, when you're very young, you need a little bit of insulin, and then the body, it reacts to it really efficiently, and then stores the energy and the fat there as well. Then as you get older, basically what happens is your body needs to produce more insulin to process the same amount of food. So your body needs to produce more insulin as you get older to handle the same amount of sugar. And that's because the mitochondria, sorry, it's a complicated word, mitochondria, which is actually the energy factory inside your cell, is less efficient. So what happens is that you produce more insulin with time to process the same amount of food. What happens is that if nothing changes, if your diet doesn't change, if nothing changes, basically what happens is that you will progress towards insulin resistance, which is something that I've made a video on as well, so you can check it out. But what that means is that actually the body needs to produce a lot of insulin that stays in your body for quite a lot, and then that has been shown to lead to things such as diabetes of type 2, of cardiovascular and Alzheimer type kind of disease as well. So it could be quite bad if it's not looked after, and depending on what you eat, depending on the exercise you do, depending on your sleep, depending on plenty of things. So it's not only this process. So don't worry if you eat really well, and if you do a lot of exercise, and if you sleep well, then you reduce a lot of your chances to have that. But it's important to understand the process. Now, why this matters is because this is not inevitable, right? So you cannot stop the process of aging, of course, at least not yet, but you can actually slow it down massively, depending on the choice you have for food, again, for sleep, for exercise in particular. So insulin sensitivity is largely influenced by the lifestyle choices that you have, right? So if you're very active, you will maintain significantly higher insulin sensitivity than sedentary people of the same age. So exercise is super important, and doesn't mean like running a marathon every day. Even that taking a 10-minute walk 3 times a day is great, right, to start with, and then you start somewhere and then just build up a little bit as well. But what you want to avoid is being sedentary and just sit down for long hours in a row during the day. That you should try to avoid that as much as you can, if you can, of course. Now, what you ate at 20, what's the real life impact of if you do that is that what you ate at 20 can now be stored, as fat. Your recovery after exercise is slower, and then your management of sugar and energy is actually less efficient. That's the issue, that if you don't do anything, if you're sedentary, you will feel also more tired after meals. So it's often a sign of declining insulin sensitivity. So that's just explaining a little bit like insulin sensitivity around that. Now that we've understood the 2 pillars, so the muscle loss and then the insulin sensitivity, as well, I want to give you the kind of the practical tips of what you can do to actually decrease those processes, which again are inevitable. Aging is inevitable, but you can reduce the pace at which you age. The first one is, as you age, you have to increase your protein intake. So this is super important, because protein intake will actually help you to maintain your not only your muscle, but as we saw on a lot of other videos as well, protein intake is extremely important for a lot of the processes in your body. Protein is absolutely key, and you can take a lot of protein unless you have a precondition as well on your kidneys. You should take a lot of protein as well. I always advise to check with a doctor, but generally, taking a lot of protein as well is very efficient for a lot of different processes. Muscle is one of them, right? Your protein needs will increase with age. So as you get older, you have to increase that protein in order to go against that 3 to 8% decline of muscle every single decade of your life. If you do the science, it says between 1.2 grams and 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of body weight for active adults over 40, something that is recommended by the science. The second thing you can do is resistance training. So as it relates to the muscle loss, resistance training is really, really important in order to maintain that muscle, to make it work hard. And that could be just, with some weights, or you can use a band as well. So in order to, work out a little bit as well, 2 or 3 sessions per week is enough to actually significantly slow down the muscle loss. And what happens is that it directly improves your insulin sensitivity, because you have a lot of muscle, so you have a lot of storage as well as you eat, right? Because the muscles are really great storage of energy as well. The third thing that you can do is, so if we go back, the first practical tips is to increase your protein intake. Secondly, is resistance training. So doing a lot of resistance training will have a massive impact. Third one, I think it's the most important one for me, but debatable. It's smart food choices to protect your insulin sensitivity. So as you get older, again, as you get, when you're 20 years old, you can eat a lot of sugar, you can eat a lot of junk food, and you get away with it. Not at 40 anymore. So what you have to do is you have to try to reduce refined sugars and blood sugar spikes. Okay, what does that mean? Refined sugars is any sugar that is not natural, right? So I take my example, I removed all refined sugars. You don't have to be that extreme, but remove all refined sugars. So my only sugars are the natural sugars that you can take in fruits, for example, right? Or peanut butter, or things that are absolutely natural, are made only of peanuts, right? So be careful with peanut butter. So you don't want to select one that has the wrong oil, like the palm oil and stuff like that. You don't want to avoid that. And salt or sugar, no, just want your own peanuts. So refined sugar, the problem with refined sugars is it actually will require a lot of insulin to process that food, and then you will have a spike of insulin in your body, and then after a crash, which actually is quite damaging in the long term if you do that quite a lot. So you want to reduce that as much as possible for your body to reduce the inflammation. Again, if you don't know what inflammation is, you should check some of my videos, because I cover that quite a lot actually. You want to prioritize low glycemic index food as much as possible as well. So this again will have a huge impact in your in your day-to-day, in your energy as well, and that will also help to actually reduce that aging process as well. So the science has been geared towards this. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of the video now. So just to recap, now you understand why when you are 20 you can't eat the same thing as when you're 40. The two main things is the loss of muscle, and the second thing is the efficiency of our little engine that we have in our cells called the mitochondria. So with this, the things that you can do, again, 3 things that you can do really easily: increase your protein intake, then do some resistance training as much as possible, and then look after what you eat, and then you'll be able to actually slow down those processes and be stronger for longer, which is really important as we want to expand our health span and not only our lifespan, right? So those are the things that are super important. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you learned something, and if you have, please subscribe, because I'm gonna every single week I publish a video, as you can see on on the rest of the channel. And if you think someone else will actually benefit from any of this information, please actually share with your friends and have them watch and comment. And yeah, I wish you a fantastic day. Thank you so much.